We're talking to the cast of the upcoming film Reagan, starring Dennis Quaid as the Gipper himself.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
You actually were kind of intimidated to take the role on, right?
Everybody in the world knows what he looked like, sounded like, so I did think about it.
What would you have me do?
I want you to fight. Talk about big shoes, or little shoes, to fill.
It's now my favorite movie that I've ever done.
We need that kind of leadership today.
There's nothing a retired governor can do about the Soviets, but a president, now he can do a thing or two.
Welcome to your life.
I was a lifeguard on a river,
There's no turning back.
and I learned how to read the currents. Not just the ones on the surface, but also the ones deep underneath the water. I am about to start the biggest war of this century, and I'm not going to fire a single shot.
You're gonna blow up 8 years of diplomacy.
Well, if you think that got their undies in a wad, you just wait.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
What would you have me do?
I want you to fight.
Everybody wants to. Everybody
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
wants to rule the world.
Please welcome my longtime good friend, Dennis Quaid. How you doing? Good to see you. It's good to see you.
You too, pal.
Yeah, we talked, a couple weeks ago here.
On the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're playing Ronald Reagan. And I was telling him when we talked before, I always kind of look at these things as to whether or not, particularly when you know somebody that you've known for over 20 years, I go into it thinking, am I going to be watching Dennis play Ronald Reagan? And it isn't very long into that before you stop seeing your friend and start seeing the character, which is pretty amazing.
That's quite a compliment, thanks.
Those were big shoes to fill.
No kidding.
You actually were kind of intimidated to take the role on, right?
Well, I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. It was like I got offered in 2018, and Reagan was my favorite president. I voted for him, and I went home and told my roommate in LA that I'd voted for him. He said, "You were kicked out of the hippies." And so I had to turn in my card right there. And so I didn't want to do an impression of him. He's like Muhammad Ali. Everybody in the world knows what he looked like, sounded like. And I did think about it. And I was invited to the Reagan Ranch, the Western White House. Reagan bought that after he was governor, and went up 5 miles of the worst road in California to get to the top of the mountain there, and came out, and I realized that Reagan was a humble man.
Yeah, it's not a fancy place, right?
No, it's not. And I could really feel him there. And like the house that they have, it's 1,100 square feet, maybe. They had a king-size bed, but it was 2 single beds that were zip-tied together. Really. Some friends had bought that place, and they left it exactly as it was. I mean, he and Nancy's clothes are in the closet. You expect them to come back like any second. And it was really something. And then we wound up shooting there as well. It was an amazing experience. It's now my favorite movie that I've ever done.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the hardest thing about getting into that character?
There was a part of Reagan that people said was very private. This is the great communicator, that there was this place that you kind of couldn't reach in him. And I think it was his place where that he used to really have privacy in a crowd, and also the place that he prayed to God from and you meditated from. But there was little stuff like he had a crooked smile. And I think it was kind of like nerve damage from some injury. But all those little things, they kind of add up. He was in the movies, And in the studios, they teach you like how to walk. Back in those days, we'd teach you how to light a cigarette and all that stuff, you know, so you could look really suave. And I think that Reagan studied John Wayne's walk a little bit.
You think?
Yeah.
Coming up, Dennis says Reagan and Trump have many similarities, and we'll talk about that next. But before we go, take a look at Ronald Reagan, the actor in the 1943 movie For God and Country.
Excuse me, Captain. I know Danny seems hopeless, but I still think he can be restored to useful service. I've been looking into his background. I don't know, but, well, maybe I found a key to his better nature. Good luck. Thanks, sir.
So the thing about Reagan, he governed by principles in the same way that he lived his life. And if you do that, you're going to make unpopular decisions, but you're going to exhibit great leadership.
Yeah.
And those principles were like from the Bible and from the Constitution of the United States. And that's what we stand on. And he wasn't afraid to do something about it.
And he personified that old saying, you can't be one kind of man and another kind of president.
Mm-hmm.
And he carried those values from his life to the presidency.
He did. I mean, one of the first things that he did, the act that shocked everybody, is that the air traffic controllers were threatening to go on strike. So Reagan just fired them all.
Fired them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wound up actually scaring the Russians because they thought, well, if he'll shut down all the airspace in his own country, what will he do to us?
Yeah, which was a damn good question. The movie starts with the terrifying assassination attempt on the president back in 1981. Take a look at this clip. That really hits home because so many of us recently watched former President Donald Trump survive an assassination attempt at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. Let's take a look at that.
Take a look at what happened.
Man, that's so disturbing. What bothered me about that is after President Reagan was shot, there's a clear picture of his head sticking up above the car as he's getting in, and there's a picture there of Trump's head sticking up again. Who knows how many shooters there are, and both presidents' heads are just sticking up after they've been shot.
Right.
We need to change that protocol. But there were similarities between things that happened, both challenges and events between Trump and Reagan's presidency.
The times are so similar to what we're going through now. There was high inflation. We had interest rates that were 20%. I know because I bought a house back then. And we had hostages, the Iran hostages. We have hostages today that no one's talking about over there in the Gaza Strip. There was a feeling of kind of malaise that we were a country that was in decline. And Reagan came along and said, no, we're not. We're going this way.
Yeah.
And we followed.
If you look at the similarities, I made a list of them. Reaganomics, tax cuts and deregulation, reducing government spending, strong impact on judiciary and Supreme Court. He was an actor versus a reality star. Democrat turned Republican. And they had differences in foreign policy. He was pro-NATO, and Trump is prioritizing national interests, is more isolationist, more ambivalent towards NATO. And
he just wants everybody to pay their fair share.
Yeah, pay up.
That's all.
Reagan was free trade, and Trump is pretty protectionist policy. So there are real similarities, which is why you're seeing the ad that you're seeing with Reagan talking and it ending up on Trump.
You know, Reagan ran really on the slogan of, are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Yeah.
And I think that question can be asked today.
Always a good question. Coming up, we're going to meet the talented actress who stepped into the shoes of Nancy Reagan. She'll tell us why Nancy was called the Dragon Lady. Robin and I have been in that stare from Nancy when she's argued about Dr. Phil shows and told me I was wrong about what happened. And I agreed. I was there, I knew I was right, but she said, no, you're wrong. And Robin and I both just said, yes, ma'am. As we go to break, here's another clip from the movie Reagan, which opens tonight. The clip is when Reagan was recovering in the hospital after the assassination attempt.
How you doing, pal?
Well, I don't recommend getting shot.
No.
You know, Tip, I think there was a reason for all this. There's a big job left to be done, and whatever time I have left, it belongs to him.
To young people watching or listening, I have a very personal message for you. There's a big, wonderful world out there for you. It belongs to you. It's exciting and stimulating and rewarding. Don't cheat yourselves out of this promise. Our country needs you, but it needs you to be clear-eyed and clear-minded. Say yes to your life. And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
Well, that was Nancy Reagan herself promoting her Just Say No movement back in the 1980s when there was a massive crack cocaine epidemic similar to our fentanyl epidemic now. Actress Penelope Ann Miller is taking on the iconic role of Nancy Reagan.
You know Washington, you know the way it works. It's politics, that's all.
They're talking impeachment.
Oh, impeachment.
Yes, they want to destroy you. They're putting you on trial, removing you from office. This isn't about politics anymore. This is about you. Everything is at stake. One more headline, one more star witness, one more arrest, and they will do it.
I have cooperated with them. I appointed a special prosecutor. I've turned over every document I have. What would you have me do?
I want you to fight.
Please welcome Penelope Ann Miller. How are you? So good to see you.
Thank you. What a nice welcome.
Well, you are welcome, and you took on quite a role.
Oh gosh, yeah, talk about big shoes or little shoes to fill.
Right.
In her case.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty daunting and quite a challenge to play Nancy Reagan.
Well, Robin and I had the privilege of knowing her, and she was a fireball, there's no question.
Yes, she was a firecracker.
Some people thought she actually ran the country at times, but she certainly was a strong influence.
She believed in her husband wholeheartedly, and she believed in his greatness, and she was willing to sort of give up the limelight. She was an actress too, and she was sort of vilified and called the Dragon Lady or whatever, but she didn't mind being the woman behind her man, and I think it's actually kind of a noble thing to say, hey, I'm gonna let him take all the glory, and I will do everything I can to protect him, to love him, to support him, to lift him. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and that's what she did.
There wouldn't have been a President Ronald Reagan without Nancy. I mean, what a beautiful lady. And she just embodies her. You were her. That's, to me.
You.
I mean,
that means a great
deal. It was like no acting going on.
Thank you.
How did you research for this? Because you did capture that connection, that bond. This is not a political movie, really.
It's a biopic. They were 8 years in the White House. They were the Reagan years. That's when I grew up. I mean, so it's a movie worth seeing for the historical nature, to know about this man and how he became what he became. I probably did the most research I've ever done on a role. I read about 6 books, talked to Sheila Tate, her press secretary, and many other people that she worked with or she knew. And like Dennis said, I didn't want to do some imitation, impersonation type thing. I really wanted to just capture her essence. And I owed it to her legacy, although the wigs helped and the wardrobe and the makeup. But yeah, it's capturing that quality and hopefully being as authentic as I possibly could. And I got to work opposite Dennis, so that didn't hurt.
No, of course not. And I do think this is part love story as much as anything else. But Robert, you remember her at the end when he did not know her or recognize her anymore, that he still was such a gentleman, right? Even when he didn't even know who people were.
Right. When we were with her one evening for dinner, I do have to say you did a beautiful job portraying her. Unbelievable, because she was very tiny, but she was mighty in spirit. And when she left that evening, it was to go home and be with him. And she told us, he won't know I'm there, and he doesn't always know who anyone is, but I know in my heart that he will at some point this evening know that I am with him and I'm telling him goodnight. And she had tears in her eyes because her love for him was so fierce, and she just believed in him until the last minute.
Yeah, it's a love story. But I think it was her daughter, Patty, said they were two halves of a circle and nobody could kind of get in there. Yeah. Maybe much to their chagrin, but it was they were a partnership. They were a true partnership, and he wrote her love notes like every day. She has a book published called "I Love You, Ronnie." I mean, who does that? Hello, guys. Start writing the love notes.
Put a lot of pressure on the rest of us, right?
Yeah. The movie in the end is really the embodiment of the American dream.
It's very aspirational.
It's important to remember. We just have to remember who we are. And Reagan was really great about reaching out across the aisle.
My parents grew up knowing the Reagans as well. And my parents were liberal Democrats, and they were able to party together and have dinners together and interact. And I just feel like now that nobody can talk to each other, there's so much more divisiveness. And I didn't experience that growing up. I don't remember that.
Yeah, and I miss that.
We may not agree and we might have different opinions, but can't we just get along? And I mean,